This is Tanya Pobeda, and this is Schooled by Gru. This month's episode is all about representation in board game artwork and in the player community. And this is a look at how representation on board game cover art impacts longtime board gamers. This is Schooled by Gru, an exclusive series for Our Family Plays Games Voices, where I do a deep dive into my PhD dissertation research and share with you the findings before the rest of the world sees it, exclusively on Our Family Plays Games. In this month's episode, we're going to be looking at what people are looking for in support of board game representation. And this was me conducting my PhD research and asking questions of board game enthusiasts centered on representation issues in board gaming. I conducted a visual analysis of the top 200 Board Game Geek ranked games, counting nearly 2,000 figures, which included human representation as well as any fauna, and that included fictional creatures as well. And what I discovered was you're more likely to see an alien, an orc, an ogre, a creature that does not exist, than you are to see an image of a human woman. One really troubling finding in my research was on those top 200 ranked Board Game Geek games, you're more likely to see an image of a bird than you are the image of a Black, Indigenous, or person of color woman on these covers. I conducted a survey in late 2020 of 320 avid board game participants who board game on a self-reported basis 70.7% of the time, at least once a week. And these avid board gamers weighed in on issues of representation. What was also really interesting about the participants of my PhD dissertation survey is many of them, the majority of my sample, had been board gaming for over 11 years or more. What was also really great about my PhD dissertation survey is I intentionally recruited for diversity of my sample, and I wanted to make sure I was hearing from the voices of women, LGBTQ+, non-binary participants, trans women, trans men, agender individuals. I wanted a diversity of gender identities as well as racial identities to fill out the survey. And what I got was a sample size of 60.4% women, including trans women, in the survey, because I very much wanted to hear from underrepresented voices in the board gaming community. The other wonderful thing about the online survey is I had terrific representation and participation from LGBTQ+ gamers who were really invested both in the hobby and in the industry, and they represented just over half of my sample. About 20.4% of the participants of the online survey self-identified as Black, Indigenous, or persons of color. That was a little lower than I wanted, but it definitely got a great participation rate from very active BIPOC board gamers in this sample. And of course, I wanted to know if representation mattered to board game enthusiasts. And what I got back was overwhelming passion that in fact it did matter to them greatly, at 84.9% agreeing or strongly agreeing that positive representation of gender and race was incredibly important to their enjoyment of a game. The other thing that people delved into was the labor of board game design. And I asked the question, were you more likely to purchase a game designed by a Black, Indigenous, person of color, and got back 56.9% agreeing or strongly agreeing with that statement. And in the survey, I got comments as well, people writing in saying things like this, where gender representation, they argued, is getting a little bit better, but racial representation is lagging far behind. I also got comments like this one talking about Asian representation on board games and how it's woefully limited. I also got a lot of comments like this one, where white board gamers are saying we don't need to see more white representation on board game artwork. And in fact, they weren't looking for that at all. They wanted new experiences, different stories told. This is my second episode of Schooled by Gru for Our Family Plays Games Voices, and this is a deep dive into what board gamers, enthusiastic board gamers, are looking for from publishers in support of representation in gaming and gaming labor. Thanks so much for listening. And this has been Schooled by Gru with Our Family Plays Games. Thanks so much for listening.